Okay, I wanted to make a quick video to go over the end of scene 1, what you just read in class. So starting on page 16, let's take a look at line 135. Well, really like line 137, where everybody exits except for Benedict and Claudio. So we're just coming off of this bantering back and forth between Beatrice and Benedict, and they insult each other, and we also meet Don John, the bastard brother of Don Pedro, and we see that he's a little sly and a man of not many few words, or of few words. And then Claudio and Benedict have this private conversation after everybody goes inside Leonato, the governor's house, to kind of settle in. Claudio and Benedict talk about Hero, the daughter of Leonato. And so Claudio says, "Hey, Benedict, did you see Hero?" And Benedict's like, "Well, I noted her, but I didn't really like think she was that much to look at." And Claudio says, "Oh, isn't she modest? She seems to be like the perfect fit for me." And Benedict says, let's see, "Why, I faith methinks she's too low for a high praise, too brown for a fair praise, and too little for a great praise. Only this commendation I can afford her, that were she other than she is, she were unhandsome, and being no other, but as she is, I do not like her." All right, and so we're getting a little bit of Benedict's opinion about a female character that really he knows nothing about. And really what this comes from is his disdain for the opposite sex. And also we can see that he's clearly been spurned in the past. Either he himself has been spurned, or a family member of his or a friend has been spurned by love or hurt by a female character or a female. And so he's quite nasty. And he also is a little worried about Claudio falling into the same trap of, unrequited or unreturned love. And so Claudio says, "Oh, thou thinkest I am in sport. I pray thee, tell truly how thou likest her. Like, seriously, quit messing around. Tell me about her." And Benedict says, "Well, would you buy her?" Now, remember, this is the time when women were considered property, right? And so he's playing a little bit of that, and Shakespeare, the writer here, is poking fun at that. It's almost satire. And Claudio, being the heartfelt person that he is, like this hopeless romantic, he says, "Oh, could you buy such a jewel?" So he literally omits completely the fact that he just called her property, and said, "Oh, she's too much of a jewel." He keeps going, even on line 159, he even says, "In mine eye, she is the sweetest lady that I ever looked on," right? And Benedict goes on, he's like, "Ugh, you're seeing through rose-colored glasses, you fool. I can see yet without spectacles, and I see no such matter. That her cousin," right? He even mentions Beatrice here, that they're related, and they must be these spinster women together, like these nasty women together. "Were not possessed with a fury, exceeds her as much in beauty as the 1st of May doth the last of December. But I hope you have no intent to turn husband, have you?" So he actually, really quickly here, he mentions that Beatrice is beautiful. Unfortunately, though, her tongue is way too quick, right? Like, she's, such a nasty, fiery person. And so, it would never work. But he actually thinks that Beatrice is better looking than Hero. And then he asks, he's like, "Ugh, are you thinking about turning husband? Like, are you thinking about marrying her? Are you really going to be a husband?" Right? And Claudio says, "Oh, only if Hero would be my wife," right? And so the Benedict has this little moment here where he actually shares his opinions on, I guess, even furthering his opinions on love. He says, "Shall I never see a bachelor of 80 again? Go to in faith, and thou wilt needs thrust thy neck into a yoke, wear the print of it in sideways Sundays. Look, Don Pedro is approaching," right? And so we get the, "Will I ever see a bachelor of 80 again?" 80, right? Like we're getting 30. Right? He's like, "Oh, you're not even going to make it to 30 and be a bachelor with me. Like, will I ever see that again?" And then he says, fine. You know what? Go and wear the yoke. All right. And now we're not talking about like an egg yoke here. We're talking about a harness. So I like to think of like an ox pulling a cart is like tethered to a cart, and the yoke is the harness that goes around the neck. And so really what he's thinking of is like marriage is harnessing him down or tying him down. Don Pedro comes in and he's like, why didn't you guys follow us in the house? You know, what's keeping you here talking? And Benedict blurts out at the bottom of 17 here, he says, oh, Claudio is all interested in Hero. Like, he wants to court her and marry her. And at the top of 18, Don Pedro actually is on Claudio's side. He says, oh, amen, if you love her, for the lady is very well worthy. And Claudio's like, oh, you speak to fetch me in, my lord. Thank you for validating my feelings. And Benedict says, oh, and by my two faiths and trust, my lord, I spoke mine. Like, I spoke my opinion. I tried to stop. So we've gotten a little bit of a different dynamic here. Whereas like Benedict had the upper hand, I think, in the last part of this conversation before Don Pedro came in. Now Don Pedro comes in and he's on Claudio's side of like pro-marriage, pro-courting Hero. Like, let's get these romantic kids together. And Benedict is kind of the odd man out now. And so then they turn their focus to talking about Claudio and Hero, the setup, right? To talking about Benedict and his opinion on marriage and love and his opinion on women in general. And so at 204, line 204, 25, like 205, this big section here, he gives his opinion. He says, that a woman conceived me, I thank her. That she brought me up, I likewise give her most humble thanks. But that I will have a recheat winded in my forehead, or hang my bugle in an invisible baldric, all women shall pardon me, because I will not do them the wrong to mistrust any. I will do myself the right to trust none. And the fine is, for the which I may go the finer, I will live a bachelor. Right? So he's like, I appreciate that a woman conceived me, like brought me into being, birthed me, raised me. I thank them for all that. But I do not want to spend my life harnessed to a woman, because I can't trust them. They're going to hurt me, because I can't even trust myself. Right? And so he's like, well, if I don't love at all, then I can't get hurt. And also the whole idea of like hanging up his manhood is mentioned there in the bugle and the invisible baldric, right? The hunting horn. And then so Don Pedro pokes a little fun here. He's making fun of him and he says, oh, I shall see thee ere I die look pair with love. He's like, don't you worry, before I die, I will see you look love sick. You will be in love at one point. And Benedict's like, ugh, with anger, with sickness, or with hunger, my lord, but not with love. You won't see me love sick. I will be sick with anger. I'll be sick with actual sickness, but I will never be sick with love. And he's like, in fact, if I am, you can go ahead and pick out mine eyes with a ballad maker's pen and hang me up on the door of a brothel house for the sign of blind Cupid. Right. Let's see. Then Don Pedro says this thing on 223. He says, well, as time shall try, in time the savage bull doth bear the yoke. And so we're getting that, like, we're getting the bull and the yoke proverb in here. And this really has a couple different meanings, especially when at 225, Benedict repeats some of that bull and yoke proverb. So in Don Pedro's little proverb here, he says that, you know, even the most spirited of young men will eventually settle down with a nice girl, right? Like eventually the most savage of beasts will settle down and become tamer. And that's essentially what he means there. And then at the bottom, Benedict switches it and he says, the savage bull may, but if ever the sensible Benedict bear it, pluck off the bull's horns and set them in my forehead, and let me be vilely painted, and in such great letters as they write, here is good horse to hire. Let them signify under my sign. Here you may say Benedict, the married man. All right. So if you were to look up online, an ancient image or historic image of a cuckold, right, in which we've talked about that term yesterday together, you would see a gold painted man, or like a metallic-y painted man with like bull horns. And the whole idea, it doesn't really matter about the image, but the whole idea is that this man has been humiliated and is an embarrassment because the woman cheated on him, right? And that he lowered himself from his masculinity to be married and then got cheated on. And so then he is this like symbol of humiliation now. And so that's essentially what he's saying here with the whole, like, take off the bull's horns, paint me in gold, take off the bull's horns, put them on my head, and go ahead and write horse for hire on my, what does it say? Yeah, on me. Okay, let's see. And then on 19, they continue to pester Benedict about his opinions of marriage. And he gets very, very angry and formal with them. And they actually poke fun at him because he's so angry about this. They're like, good Lord, it's not that deep, man. Benedict says, or I'm sorry, Don Pedro at 2:35 says, well, you will temporize, calm down about this, be a little bit more mild about this, and go back in, tell Leonardo that we're going to come to dinner eventually. Like, we'll be there. And Benedict says, I have almost matter enough in me for such an embassage, and so I commit you. So he's about to say, he's like, okay, I'll run this errand for you, and so I commit you. He's about to say, so I bid you adieu, right? So I will see you later, right? And Claudio interjects and he says, to the tuition of God from my house, if I had it. And Don Pedro says, to the 6th of July, your loving friend, signed Benedict, right? So they're making fun of how formal he's being and how serious he's being about this whole marriage prospect, right? And this idea of marriage, that he's overly serious. And so they're like pretending that he is signing a letter with how formal he is speaking. So they're pretending that he's signing off in the conversation. They're making fun of him here. It's essentially the idea. And so even Benedict's like, mock not, mock not. The body of your discourse is sometimes guarded with fragments, and the guards are but slightly basted on neither. Ere you flout old ends any further, examine your conscience. And so I leave you. And so he actually exits now. And if you look, there's a little glossary section here. And so let's take a look at that. So it says 25, Benedict is criticizing their wordplay. And so if you go back to the end of the book here, which is on 85, you'll see sometimes guarded with fragments. In response to Claudio and Pedro's mockery of his speech, Benedict retorts that their wittiness is lacking coherence, meaning like they're not that funny. And that they're not that witty. They're not that smart. The whole point of this is wordplay is very important in Much Ado About Nothing. Characters are always criticizing, building on, and playing off of each other's words and phrasing, which makes it very hard sometimes to understand what's going on. Formal styles of writing and speaking are often referenced, as here when a casual word becomes the closing of a letter. That's what we just seen. Or eventually at the wedding of Claudio and Hero, spoiler alert, when Benedict quotes a widely used Latin grammar because everybody is like speaking in the wrong term. And he's like, chastising them. Okay, so Benedict leaves. Now Don Pedro has this very serious conversation with Claudio and basically urges him to share his feelings about Hero. And so he shares his feelings in this really large section at 2:55 at the bottom of 19 about how he looked at the world with a soldier's eye, and then he saw Hero, and his world changed. And he has lots of feelings, right, that he brings out here. And Don Pedro says, okay, you'll be a lover presently, and tire the hearer with a book of words. If thou dost love fair Hero, cherish it, and I will break with her and with her father, and thou shalt have her. Wast not to this end that thou beginnest to twist so fine a story. He says, wow, if you are left to your own devices, Claudio, you're going to scare her away because you're yapping too much. He literally says, you're going to tire her out. You're going to tire the hearer out. And so we have a plan now. So at 20, this is what's going to happen in Act 2. The plan is made. So let's read through this at 20. What need the bridge much broader than the flood? Why work harder than you need to, is what he says. The fairest grant is the necessity. Look, what will serve as fit? 'Tis once thou lovest, and I will fit thee with the remedy. I know we shall have reveling tonight. I know there's a party coming tonight. Like, we're in from the war. We're partying at Leonardo's. There's going to be probably a masquerade. We're very popular at this time. So he says, listen, I will assume thy part, your part. I will pretend to be you in a disguise. And I will tell Hero that I am you, that I am Claudio. And in her bosom, which is the chest, right, I'll unclasp my heart and take her hearing prisoner with the force and strong encounter of my amorous tale. Then after to her father will I break. And the conclusion is, she shall be yours. She shall be thine. In practice, let us put it presently, right? Let's go and do it, right? So the plan is that, just to reiterate here, the plan is that Don Pedro, they're all going to be in masks as a masquerade, right? He's going to be in a mask and pretend to be Claudio, and he's going to flirt and woo Hero and say all the right things because he's clearly the master of love, right? This is a common theme in Shakespeare, especially in a comedy where the older generation will meddle in the younger generation's scruples, right? Or in their love affairs. And this is exactly what's going on here. He's like kind of taking charge and being like, let me handle it. You just sit by and watch, pal. And then he's like, I'll say all the right things. I'll make sure that I have her right, like putty in my hand. And then I'm going to go to her father. I'm going to make sure all the arrangements are set there. And then I will turn her over to you and we'll reveal our little plan and ta-da, you guys are courting already, right? Then you're like basically proposing right there. Okay, so that's the end of Act 1, Scene 1. So you guys are going to read tomorrow Scene 2 and Scene 3, which are quick little scenes. One from Leonardo and Antonio, brother to brother. And then another where there's an evil plot going to be hatched between Don John, Conrad, and Borachio, their companions. Okay,